After 20 years, Jacob reunites with his brother Esau. Does it go well for him? Hi, I'm Ronald, and welcome to Bible Talk, where I discuss parts of the Bible, and today I'm continuing in the book of Genesis, going on from chapters 32. Doesn't it seem like we've covered so much ground already? Well, we're just getting started. Jacob and his family fled from Laban to head back toward Canaan, which is where his brother Esau lives, the one who wanted to kill him. Now, Esau lives in an area called Edom, which is why the descendants of Esau are called Edomites. Chapter 32 begins with Jacob going on his way, and the angels of God met him. Now, when Jacob saw them, he said, "This is God's camp." And he called the name of that place Mahanaim. Now, we don't exactly know what this means. In some way, angelic beings that are normally unseen were now made visible to Jacob. And they met him. Perhaps God wanted Jacob to know how great his care was for him and his family. And this wonderful revelation of God presents and cares came after Jacob finally separated from Laban, his father-in-law, the worldly man. Separation from the world brings greater insight to believers. Verse 7 and 8, Jacob was greatly afraid and distressed. When Laban confronted Jacob with hostility, Jacob boldly stood up to him and spoke his mind, Genesis 31, verses 36 to 42. Yet Jacob was afraid to meet Esau, and this was because Jacob knew that he was right with Laban, but he knew that he was in the wrong with Esau. Spurgeon wrote, Jacob had just been delivered from Laban, but he was oppressed by another load. The dread of Esau was upon him. He had wronged his brother, and you cannot do a wrong without being haunted by it afterward. Shakespeare was right when he wrote, "Conscience does make cowards of us all," Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1. Just as Jacob had no strength before Esau because of his guilt, many Christians today are also hindered by the memory of their past sins and failings. Now Jacob left home after his brother swore to kill him, and Rebekah told him that until your brother's anger turns away from you and he forgets what you've done to him, then I will send for you and bring you there, Genesis 27:45. But Rebekah never showed or sent for Jacob, so he had very reason to believe that Esau was still angry with him, even 20 years later. But Jacob also had every reason to believe that God would protect him. He seemed to have forgotten that God had a special camp of angels there to protect him, Genesis 32, 1 and 2. Jacob sends his messengers ahead of him to smooth things over if and when they encounter Esau, and they brought gifts. And the messengers come back saying that he's coming, and he's got 400 men with him. 32:22, Jacob separates from his family and places his people from least loved to most loved. And then he arose in the night, took his 2 wives, his 2 female servants, and his 11 sons, and crossed over the ford of the Jabbok. And he took them, sent them over the brook, and sent over all that he had. Then Jacob was left alone. He's strategically maybe even driven by fear, but also there's a lovely moment where he's humbled, praises God for his provision, and acknowledges his relatives. In 32:9, we see the first time Jacob addresses God by his name. And in 32:10, he says, "I am not worthy of the least of all the deeds of steadfast love and the faithfulness that you have shown your servant." Now, while fearing the worst, Jacob remembers God's words and appeals to him, reminding him of his specific promises to his family. Now, George Mueller, a great man of faith and prayer, was once asked what was the most important part of prayer, and he answered, "The 15 minutes after I have said amen." Now, no matter how great Jacob's prayer was, his faith would be seen in what he did after the prayer. In verse 22 and 23, Jacob sends all his entourage ahead of him, and he spends the night alone. Then 24:25 says Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of day. Now when he saw that he did not prevail against him, he touched the socket of his hip, and the socket of Jacob's hip was out of joint as he wrestled with him. Now Jacob didn't wrestle with the man, instead the man wrestled with him. Jacob didn't start out wanting anything from God. God wanted something from Jacob. God wanted all of Jacob's proud self-reliance and fleshly scheming, and God came to take it by force if necessary. As the following verses show, this was not a mere man. This was God in the human form, another special appearance of Jesus in the Old Testament, before his incarnation in Bethlehem. Now, I'm going to leave it here for today. Thank you so much for watching. God bless you all, and we'll see you next time.